Well, I want to really thank everyone for showing up. You know, you get along with these things, and attendance is pretty much what you look for. But I'm also very excited because the last time I came here to speak was about 5 years ago, and it didn't really start so well. I was coming to speak to a smaller computer science class, talking about what we do and how it relates to computer science. And I was actually, when I was driving out, I was coming out with alumnus of the program who probably graduated in 2004, 2005. And we're driving along, and I've got my little Honda Civic, and I was really proud of myself because when you start a technology company, you have to get the personalized license plate, which I did. So I have a personalized license plate that says Bronto, and I'm driving along, and I'm going down Hillsborough Street, and we're at this is where our stories differ. According to me, there was at this light, and it was very unclear. You know, it's one of those situations where it's going to turn red, but the bus is in front of you, and it's going kind of slow. And so I kept on going, which seemed like the logical thing. It was like, you just got a ticket. I'm like, what are you talking about? And apparently there's some automatic things that kind of scan and tell you when you run through lights. And so I said, I'm not going to get a ticket. Well, one of the downsides about having a personalized license plate is it becomes pretty clear when you get a ticket. So they automatically send something in the mail. They send 3 pictures, a picture of me, a picture of the red light with me in the middle of an intersection, and a zoom in of a license plate that says Bronto. And what would have been the best slide here today is for me to be able to put that up here, but I'm too messy, and so I couldn't actually find it. But it was extremely incriminating. I'm glad to have come here, and hopefully I won't get anything in the mail. I still have the license plate, so hopefully I won't get anything in the mail a month or so from here saying I've got another ticket, because that would be 2 in a row, and 2 points make a line, and that's a bad direction with my relationship here. So when I speak, I like to make a few ground rules. Okay, you guys ready for this? This isn't just some passive, I'm sitting in the back, I'll just kind of tune out and text and do other things type of presentation. This is one where, you have to remember, I used to be a teacher, so I'm a little bit more aggressive in terms of participation. But first off, I want your expectations for me to be very, 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 very low. Okay? That helps me. Okay? If it's too high, it's like going to see a movie that's really, really, you think it's going to be great, and you go see it, and you're like, oh, it's okay, because you thought it was going to be great. But if your expectations are really, really, really low, I really just have to do anything moderately better than lousy, and this is going to be a great experience. Now, it's reverse for you. My expectations for you are really, really, really high. And so what I look for is a lot of insightful questions. I like questions throughout. At the end. We'll certainly have time for that. And really everyone can kind of really pay attention. So does that sound fair so far? Okay, third number thing is I tell stories in very non-linear fashions. So do you guys ever see the movie Memento? Right? You see how it's like you watch and you're like, what the fuck happened? Like, what is, it's so confusing. I don't know what just happened. It's a good chance that this presentation will be like that. But at the end, you want to watch it again, and you'll say, I really actually got something out of that, right? So as long as we have those rules agreed to, then we can move forward. Is that good?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Okay, remember number 2? Expectations high from you. Okay, all right, so that's good. So let's go ahead and kind of move forward. And what I want to do is talk about really 2 things. First, I'm just going to give you a quick explanation in terms of what Bronto is for context. But to some extent, it's really just for context. The main point here is I want to talk about 10 hard-earned lessons in terms of how I kind of basically started a business, going from really the coding level to really having a company. And I know a lot of you are related to computer science, or you're interested in being an entrepreneur, or you're an entrepreneur now. And my purpose of this talk is not to sell you on Bronto or really even talk technology. My purpose is to say, how can a computer science person or someone that has an idea, what are some things that they can take away that are tangible, hard-earned lesson, not someone who really didn't do it and they speculate what it's about, that I've learned over the last 10 years. Now, the thing is, and this is where if you're a good entrepreneur you'll realize this, is you're really, really confident about yourself. And so whatever I tell you that might be different than what you're thinking, you can just tell me to screw myself. Because the thing is, this is a recipe. This is the one way I did it. But you look at 10 different stories and you find 10 different ways. But when you hear different stories and different lessons, inevitably there's little nuggets along the way. So you kind of decide which ones you're going to pick and choose. Does it sound good? Okay, 10. It's also 10's good because one of the things you learn in teaching and so forth is you want to do something called signposting. So in case you're getting bored, it gets sleepy, you at least know how long you have to go. Okay? Sound good? All right. Not so much? Okay. All right, let's kind of get started. Let's start with the context part of, kind of behind the back. That's pretty good. In terms of what we do. So Bronto, is, back in the day, was a fairly simple online email newsletter type offering. So we'd have customers who would log on, they would manage it's like a glorified Hotmail for business. They would manage all their contact lists. They would figure out a newsletter that they kind of send out. And to some extent, a lot of our local customers, including universities, we signed up back in the day. But really, where we spend our days now is something a bit more sophisticated. We call it a marketing platform for commerce. So we have primarily retailers and other people who sell things online, mid-market retailers, people like Trek Bikes, Etsy, locally you might hear Lulu, Samsonite, all these different types of companies. They have marketing departments. And their marketing departments, they have someone there who's probably an e-commerce marketing manager who logs on and says, I have to run all of their online campaigns, whether that's through email, whether that's through mobile, whether it's through social. And their job is you've purchased something from that brand. Whatever it is, maybe it's shoes, maybe it's socks, maybe it's a jacket, maybe it's a watch, whatever. And a marketer, the way they think is, I've spent a lot of money in Google to acquire you as a customer. In some cases, a lot of money. In fact, if you type in auto insurance and you click on one of those links, you're going to screw someone $40. So if you're online right now and you go into Google, type in auto insurance and click on a few links just for the heck of it, because you're going to stick it to the man, right? So that's going to be $80 or $120. Well, that's very, very expensive for just a click. And they hope that eventually you'll buy something, and they'll track that. That's great. That's pretty much the main way that they acquire people online. But what's really, really important for marketers is how they retain you, how they get a one-time buyer to be a repeat buyer. And the way you do that is you acquire email addresses, SMS phone numbers, social handles, and you basically say, if you join us, or if you bought something, we would love to give you more promotions. We would love you to get tied in because you love our brand. And some portion of you are going to do that because you love Nike shoes, or you love Zappos, although Zappos don't be giving them password for them. That didn't really work out too well for them. But other people, because they know that you want to stay engaged and you've gotten loyalty. And for them, that's good business. Because the cost of them keeping you as a customer is a lot less than that $40 a click they have over here for auto insurance. So what Bronto does is we have a platform where these retailers manage all their email, mobile, social campaigns. So ultimately, they can acquire and maintain customers. So it ties into the shopping cart, so it knows what people are purchasing. The marketers can be really smart. They realize that if you like Nike shoes versus Adidas shoes, you can segment people. If you're going to sell a certain type of good and it's only in the winter, well, let's only send it to people in those states. So there's a lot of segmentation and reporting. And when you look at it from a computer science point of view, it's very much a great computer science problem. That's not how the salespeople look at it, but that's how the engineers look at it. And the reason is because you have a massive amount of data. And when you have a massive amount of data and you have to solve on the fly in real time, very quick segmentations, that means that we need a lot of great computer science people to figure that out. So although it might seem like it's just kind of sending out some newsletters, what's really the story about it is how do you kind of process and cut lots of tracking data? How do you cut and track, segment groups of people that are millions and millions and millions, and you do that very, very real time, and you make a lot of interesting connections. So that's ultimately what we do. We have 1,000-some customers that log on every day, that manage all these different types of campaigns. We've been doing this for close to 10 years. This May will be our official 10-year anniversary. Although I actually started working the prototype a little bit before that. We're thinking of celebrating by having an 80s prom, so it's a reason to join Bronto. You can participate in your 80s prom. It's a term called software as a service, and this term changes as fashionable. It's now cloud computing, I believe. It's software as a service. Before that, it was on demand, and then it was ASP. Basically, it means it accesses everything over the web. Now, as common as that may sound, that wasn't as common 10 years ago, believe it or not. So, which is a great business model. We have about 125 employees. 90% of them are actually based in our Durham office in American Tobacco. Have you guys ever been to American Tobacco? Raise your hand. Okay, let's start. Okay, have you ever been to this triangle? Raise your hand. See, this is how we test. See if what's happening. Okay, so American Tobacco. Has anyone ever been to Tyler's in American Tobacco? Right, so all above and around Tyler's, which is a brew pub, which is really, really good for our business. We connect with that a lot, is our business. So that's where we're located. We have about 90% of the people there. We have other people that are remote, or we're also looking at starting an office in Europe. So that's where we are today. So we're a very real, we call it a software company, but basically it's a very real software as a service business that's been kind of born and bred in Durham. And those are kind of facts. But my goal here today is not really talk about where we are today. What I want to do is give you the two endpoints. I want to talk about where we are today. I want to talk about where I was about 10 years ago. And then I'm going to talk a little about the lessons along the way, the difference between this point and that point. Does it sound good?
Yes.
See? That's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about. All right. Okay. This didn't work so well that time. All right. So before I got to my spare bedroom, I was actually in my den. And this is my den. Actually, I still have this den. I still live in the same house. So to backtrack a little bit and tell you a little bit of my history, after I graduated college, I was a computer science major. And I knew later in life I was going to have lots of opportunities to do lots of interesting things. But I also knew that I was going to have a job, I was going to have a mortgage, I was going to have obligations, and I was going to have a lot of people telling me that I couldn't do things. So I wanted to use an opportunity immediately after college to do something very, very, very different. So I actually joined the Peace Corps. I was originally supposed to go to Kenya, but actually ended up going to a small group of islands in the Indian Ocean called the Seychelles. And so whenever Somali pirates really kind of wander too far out in the water, they seem to end up in these islands. They're actually pristine, tropical, beautiful islands, and would be best thought of is like a Caribbean island, really small. There are only 80,000 people in this country. It's an independent country. 9 out of 10 Americans have never heard of the country, much less put it on a map. So honestly, and really, really honestly, if you've heard of the Seychelles, raise your hand. Okay, now keep your hands up. If you can place it on a map, I just told you. But if you could have before, then keep your hand up. There we go. There we go. All right. All right. So it's really, really small. And I went there, and I was a teacher for 2 years. And what I taught, what they really needed, is they wanted to ramp up what they're doing in computers because they had access to the outside world. So I taught in kind of more of a humanities school, and actually taught A-level computing, which is a very odd Peace Corps thing to do for 2 years. A-levels, you guys are familiar in the States where they have an AP level program? A-levels is the British equivalent, but it's like AP class plus the first year of college, more or less. So very, very weird Peace Corps experience. But I spent 2 years there, and I want to talk about that in a second. Then I spent some time teaching in Ecuador, and then, really for the hell of it, I moved to North Carolina because it sounded like a good idea. I had the oceans, the mountains. I really didn't know much at the time. And went to grad school, and then I decided, hey, I had lots of great opportunities, but I really want to work at an interesting startup. And I saw this little kind of rough little startup that looked really interesting. And I said, you know, when I started college, when I was in college, it was right before the web blew up. And I saw all how it kind of looked before it became really big. And here's another company that seems to have a leadership position in all this other industry called open source and Linux that's really, really compelling. So I want to go do everything, try to go work there, which I did, and that company ended up being Red Hat. So, and then soon after I joined, it went public and became a very, very big thing. And as exciting as that was during, this is the dot-com boom and all that, at the end of the day, my calling was much more of an entrepreneur. It was much more of a life calling. So it wasn't about just having another job. It's where I was wired. It was very exciting what I was doing. It was a very exciting time at the company. But at the end of the day, I wanted to do my own gig. So in summer of 2000, I left. No other job. My wife was working and said, you know, we're going to figure this out. And I set up shop here. And I want to go through a lot of the different lessons of the reality is, when I was at Red Hat, I wasn't an engineer. I was doing marketing. I barely had the two numbers together, right? There were a lot of reasons. I didn't have a particular idea in terms of what I was going to do. I mean, it really was, most people would chalk up a very poor life decision. But you're going to see as I talk through it how, because of other perspectives, was able to kind of muscle through and actually come up with something that was somewhat workable. All right? 2 points. There we go. So this side, I'm proud of. This, you guys, got to pick it up. A little bit less people over here, but all right. So let's go through it. Did that work? No. All right. So lesson 1. Right. This is a picture of my students in Seychelles. Right. They're Seychellois. Right. Islanders. And obviously they didn't have none of the computers and so forth. But their first language was Creole. Later on, they learned English and French as well. And why I'm showing you this, and why you're like, what the hell does this have anything to do with computer science? And what does this have to do with entrepreneurship? Is I think when you're an entrepreneur, a lot of people think very linearly and think, I need to start this company, so I'm going to do this. Or I'm graduating with a degree, and I need to do this and logically do this. Doesn't lead for the most interesting of life, but also you want to think in terms of Karate Kid experiences. Have you guys ever seen Karate Kid? Who's seen Karate Kid? Right? Remember that wax on, wax off? Remember? Remember it's like wax on, wax off. He has, Mr. Miyagi has, what's that guy's name? The kid's name? Remember? You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, so he's like scrubbing the floors all day. He doesn't really know. And he's like, when am I doing this? And then Mr. Miyagi brings him up. He's like, wax on, wax off. And there's this realization he's actually learned something. Well, you know, that's kind of like life in that if I would have kind of linearly taken a path, there are a lot of things I wouldn't have learned that are extremely valuable to me now. Where this was really, really valuable, and you want to think about Karate Kid experiences, is because I had to teach. And teaching, particularly when you're teaching, and it has to be a different language, and surprise, surprise, high school students aren't always the most interested in what you have to say, you really get very focused on a couple things. One is you learn how to learn names. And as the company grows, that's really important because you're the leader and you want to be able to encourage and inspire people. 2, you get very good in terms of how to communicate things very, very clearly. Not a big issue when you're small, but when you get bigger, your role completely changes. And the ability to articulate, we're going to do this, and this is why, and boom, 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 I need you to do this, and I can't be on you for every second, is invaluable. So this early experience of being a teacher, and there's different ways, in a very, very different environment, is not so different than entrepreneurship. Also, in that, had to manage lots of different student projects and development, and that's not so different when you're at very early stage and you have a few engineers, and you're trying to kind of push forward and figure out how are we actually going to make a product. So it would seem on the surface very, very different, and it is very different. But there are underlying Karate Kid type experiences that are essential in terms of building a business. So inevitably, when you think about entrepreneurship, you have them in your own life as well. It's a summer job, it's a class you took, it's whatever, it's just a particular hobby, it's because something about your personality. And those are hard to quantify in nice little boxes, but are really, really important and not to be discounted. So, lesson 1. You guys got it? How many more we got? Okay. All right. So Karate Kid. Everyone loves Karate Kid. This is when my shitty car was looking really, really good. Okay? So basically, the lesson here is you want to keep your burn rate low. And that's kind of a little bit of a venture capitalist term. That means if you're living large, it's very hard to do what it takes to cut back expenses and do all those things in order to start a business. That's the reality. There are lots of dream stories out there where people just kind of make it all happen. But the reality is that most entrepreneurs, they're very, very focused. They put everything they can into doing and starting the business. Everything out of it gets kind of cut. And that means that's particularly hard for me. I was coming out of business school. Most people get very large salaries, take very large jobs. I consciously probably got the lowest paid in my out of my class, working at Red Hat because I was going to a startup. That was my goal. It was very different than other things. But if you kind of realize it's not about what you're doing out of the gate, ultimately it's about what you enjoy, and it's more a long-term play, it can be very, very compelling. So to give you an idea, when I left Red Hat, I didn't take a salary for 3 years. Okay? That's a long time, particularly when you're older and so forth. And other things, when this car I had for many, many years, right? Beyond that, I since got rid of it. In fact, the one I got a ticket from ended up being the newer one. And you just have to kind of decide where you're going to put your money. And the reason is when you see progress, is you know that if you take $1 out of your business, you're foregoing $1.50. And so it starts becoming, as you get momentum, very, very compelling. But it's hard to start if you have to seriously downgrade your standard of living. It's hard. It's hard to shift that. So one of the advantages that students have actually in starting their businesses, and there are lots of disadvantages, but one of the advantages is you don't have any money. So it's easier because you're not really worried about what you're giving up. When my wife and I was married by this time, when we bought this house and the car, we made sure that this is a lifestyle that we can live on just one low salary. That was the goal, right, from the get-go. So setting yourself up for success means partially setting up your cost structure so it's very manageable is really, really important. And that's an advantage for many students. And it's hard. I had debt. I had all those things. But you can make it happen if you're very focused. You just have to be willing to really focus on a goal, have a long-term perspective, and set everything else. It was funny. So I had this car parked out on the street, and I would just sit there in the morning, and inevitably, one time my neighbor just kind of backed up and just completely smacked into it. And she came back, "Oh, I'm sorry, I've got all insurance." I don't care. I don't like that car anyways. And it was fine. It just looked like it. That's when it really started looking bad. In fact, the reason I got rid of it is because, and actually had to move out of the den in the spare bedroom, is my wife and I were having a baby, and this is after not taking a salary, and I was like, oh crap, I really have to figure this out right now. And I used to drive around in this, and I wouldn't wear my seatbelt, not because I have any problem with seatbelts, because I literally thought it was faster. I was convinced it was going to burst into flames, and I literally thought it was faster that if I had to just roll out, that it would be just easier if I didn't have a seatbelt. And then we had the baby in the car seat, and my wife thought that logic wasn't the best, because then how do you get the baby? And so, anyways. So that's lesson number 2. All right, lesson number 3, and this is just the hard facts, is I'll get to this one, is the reality is when you're younger, you've got more flexibility in your life when you're older. It's hard. It's easier in some ways, a lot of disadvantages. That's why you see a lot of technology startups started by younger people than older people. Older people, wiser, probably more financially sound, blah, 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 but they've got mortgages, they've got kids, they've got obligations. It's a little bit harder for them to focus on everything. Another hard fact is if you're going to start a software company or whatever company you're going to start, you need to be technical or you need to have someone that's technical. Inevitably, you see this particularly in business schools, they're like, oh, I have this idea, and if I can just get this technical person, then they'll solve all my problems. It's like, yeah, it really needs to be fundamental to your business. So for me, I was technical as an undergraduate, but many years had passed, and really, I've been done other things, and I hadn't been focused on web programming or any of that stuff I really knew. And when I spent 2 years in business school, which isn't technical at all. When I was at Red Hat, again, I was in marketing, and we barely add numbers together, at least in the marketing I was doing. So I spent the time and said, I'm going to have to learn how to do, even though I was at Red Hat, I didn't use Linux or anything like that. So I'm going to have to learn how to do web programming. I have to learn all this database stuff. We're going to learn how to be a sysadmin, and we're going to have to do it all by myself with no help. And that takes a long time, and it's really, really hard when you have no other resources to kind of tap into. But that's what I did. And so I took this picture because I used to post, this is it's still out there, if you Google my name, Colopy, and MySQL, you'll see it, I just get stuck. And I was like, help, help, help. And you get stuck for days on these random problems that even now, I could solve trivially. And it's really, really hard. But that's why it's so essential. But it's really essential, and it's very valuable now, because now as I kind of lead a group that has a lot of engineering people on, to have engineering credibility, to actually understand how things work. I built the first version of the product. We used it, pretty much the same framework, until we were about $2 million in sales and 20-some people. So at some level, even though the engineers told me all the time what I did was such a crappy, crappy job, it still worked good enough, and it really helped to be technical. So being technical, if you're going to do something software, helps having that at the core of your group every time. And there's always exceptions, but those are always said by people who aren't technical. So this kind of relates to the other one of, inevitably you speak to entrepreneurs and people are starting businesses and they have coding ideas, and they're very focused on, is this the greatest idea ever? Is this the idea? And the reality is, it really, and even venture capitalists will look at it this way, it's really less about the idea. I mean, some ideas, there are some dumb ideas. There are, in fact, most ideas are dumb ideas. But it's really about getting started in the right area. And so when I started down the road of kind of thinking about what became Bronto, I didn't suddenly have it all mapped out and know exactly how we were going to run, or even in fact it was going to be email marketing or email newsletters, what that was even called. You know, my basic premise was I tend to get some good ideas. I don't really have any right now, but if I can learn how to connect a database with web application, be able to do that myself and be able to manifest any of the ideas myself, then I will be able to kind of create, iterate, and do whatever. And then something good will happen. And so this first evolved into something called Database App, which was this broad database, the idea online database that people would log on to, and they would kind of manage their data and manage all these forms and reports. And it was this granular. It was going to be beautiful, and it was just the most solve every problem thing. The problem with it is I had no customers. That was kind of a big problem. Also, it was just too broad a concept that people would get their hands around. And it was too difficult for me to execute off of that. But the reality is, as I got into it, I realized that it's a little bit more of a journey. And that starting with this, I was able to kind of branch other things, and I eventually took one piece of it, which was, you guys ever remember, you remember the keynote, but in Microsoft Word and things, they have something, they used to have something called word merge. They still probably have it for mailing labels. So you basically take your mailing label list and your letter, it's like, hello, ... and you swap in George, Joe, Fred, whatever. Well, I thought, boy, that would be really handy. I built it into a module here called email merge. And then when I was struggling with this, I decided just to cut out that one piece to solve a more specific problem. And that eventually became an email newsletter, and then email marketing, and then marketing campaign management tool, which eventually became Bronto. But it didn't start with that. So ideas are cheap, and you have to start with something, and then you kind of move to something else. And in Bronto's case, when I was toiling around coding, trying to figure things out, it started off as something much different, much simpler. But because I was in the game, I could focus my attention, I could see, and I could twist and turn, and I could see it actually turn into something else. So often the original idea is not what it's about. Because until you're immersed in it, you don't really see opportunities that you're going to see further along the way. One of the things I always describe at Bronto is that entrepreneurship and anything we're doing in the business, it's a journey. So if you stop and you're sitting here and you're thinking, how do I create $1 million business, or even a $100,000 business, $1 million business, $1 billion business, how do I become the next Google, Yahoo, Facebook, whatever? It's really hard, if not impossible, right? What you really need to do is like, how do I become this size business? Because it's like being on a long hike, and then suddenly you're a little bit more of a vista, and then you can say, oh, okay, now I know how to get here, and then get here, and get here, and get here. And it ends up being a little bit more of a kind of random walk of sorts, but as long as you're moving forward, you find that you kind of move to higher and higher heights. So it's a little bit of a different strategy. And that's particularly relevant for Bronto. One of the key differences that I should have mentioned off the bat is most technology companies are heavily funded by outside investors. We've actually never raised any money. So there's no rich uncle, no outside investors, no venture capital, anything like that. And what that's done, you spend time, it takes a lot of time, but it's allowed us to maintain a lot of control, which is more important than, it's not as much financial, although we have that, it's more so about having a long-term vision for your business and be able to execute over that a long period of time and not having lots of other distractions. And one of the reasons we've been able to do that is because we've taken a lot of these philosophies and lessons to heart. So far, so good? How many more we got? Oh, yeah. Hang in there. They get better. So the first version of Bronto Mail kind of looked like this. And actually, it doesn't look too bad. I mean, it looks kind of clean. It doesn't look really bad. I mean, it's a screenshot. See that logo there? I did that. I did that in word art. You guys ever draw anything in word art? I wasn't really a joke. I thought I did a pretty good job, but no. Yeah, so obviously we've updated the logo. It had a lot of issues. Looks clean enough, but actually it was pretty simple. And that helped, like my earlier point saying you kind of start somewhere, and then you iterate on anything. It's going to get better and better as you add more people and time, money, and energy. So actually what we have now is a lot more sophisticated. But the main reason I put this up there is because the behind it, we're talking about massive spaghetti code. We're talking about ugly infrastructure, does not scale, the worst possible coding practices, and it's just bad, right? And there's a saying, actually, the founder of LinkedIn said, Reid Hoffman, is if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you're doing something wrong. And it's true. And the reason that's really true is because, particularly if you're an engineering type, you want to get it perfect, right? I want to get my mousetrap perfect before I show the world, before I get it out there. And that's very, very admirable in school. It's deadly when you're in entrepreneurship. And the reason is there's lots of great ideas that incubated in a little comfortable little cocoon that no one really sees. But until you get users, until you get it out there, until you're launching, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter because you don't get credit for effort. You only get credit for what's out there. And there's a lot of crappy things out there, but if you start off and you can execute there quickly and you get the feedback and it drives the feedback sooner, you're going to accelerate your process until you have something really good. And you're going to accelerate your learning. If you just kind of keep it and you kind of tinker it, that's great. I'm sure it'll be better. A, will it ever launch? And B, you're really not getting the feedback you really need. And that's from other customers and users. And, it helps have a thick skin. It's not fun for, someone to poke and say, what your little baby is crap. I mean, you have an ugly baby. No one wants to hear that, right? But it's, particularly in real life. But it is really, really valuable because harsh feedback, and if it's hopefully constructive, is really what you need because you're not the customer, right? You're not the end user. They are, or hopefully they are. And if you can shrink the time that you get that, that's really, really valuable. So when I look back and I look at database app, the thing I just showed you, one of the key problems is it was a great little project. It was great. I would wake up in the morning, I would kind of code, do that, kiss my wife off to work, have some justification for what I'm doing all day, go to Boston Market for lunch, code some more. It was great. No one criticized me. I could do whatever I want for a while until the baby was coming in, and that thing got kiboshed. But basically, it was good. And then but it went nowhere. I mean, it looked nice, but it had really no customers until I had something like this where I made good enough, and then I quickly got feedback and iterated. That's when things really started moving forward. All right. So we have some newer logos. All right, so this is the good. Have you guys seen this before? All right, so there's two pictures in here. All right. So which one, if you see the young lady, raise your hand. Okay, keep your hands up. Okay. If you also see the old lady, I didn't see it for a long time. It took me a while. Keep your hand up. It's kind of me. You guys see it? Okay, so I'll point it to you, and then I'll explain why I'm throwing this up, although it's kind of interesting. So basically, let's do the young lady. I think that's easier. So her head is turned. This is her neck. That's kind of her ear. Her eye would kind of be there. I think that's probably the more obvious one. The old lady, it's kind of like this is her mouth and her chin and her nose, right? You kind of see it? It's in there. I'll keep it up for a while. So the reason I show this is, A, I thought it was a cool picture, but B, I had another one, but the other one was really risque, and I thought, okay, that wouldn't be such a good idea. There's this word, and I don't know exactly how to pronounce it, but it looks like pranja. And basically, it's a Sanskrit word, and it really means, in the purest form, it's more of like wisdom. But in the context I was reading about it is, it's really having a very clear assessment of the realities of your situation, being brutally honest, and making decisions and figuring out a way from that. And that's really important in entrepreneurship because there's a lot of things in life, whether you're at school or whether you're working, that you do relative to other things. You do because I got this score, and somehow in the States we say that when you get 93%, that's an A. Or if you get 80%, that's a B minus or C or whatever, depending on what schedule. But then you go to other, but that's all relative to our scales, right? You go to some British educational system, and that would be an A. Or it just varies where you go. But in Panja, in entrepreneurship, it's kind of like none of that matters. Basically, what really matters in terms of is what you're getting done, right? Are you building a product? Are you getting customers? Are you generating revenue? So all the other things that seem like what you should do in terms of business, let's get business cards, let's get an office, oh, we're supposed to do this, we're supposed to do that, it really doesn't matter. And it helps early stage to be kind of a bit of a dictator about it, because there's really no room for anything else. And you really have to take a very hard assessment, and you have to make changes. So, and some of those decisions are really hard. So for example, about a number of years into the business, we had a release. I pushed the engineers really hard, and it went horribly wrong. It happened in May. We call it the May Massacre. We still refer to it. And basically, our whole product was so bad, I mean, the release was so bad that it shut down all our customers for several days. And so that's a bad thing when you're an early stage startup. That is not a good thing. And we even had someone in the Triangle Business Journal write up that we had all these problems, and it's like, So you have to make some very strong moves and you don't want to really think that your business that you've spent years building is on the brink of losing it because you just had this random thing happen. So you have to take a very hard assessment of what's going on. And that hard assessment, we comped all our customers. We were very aggressive in terms of you don't have to pay anything for a while, blah, 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 blah. And those decisions, although they're easy when you look back on them now, they're hard at the time because you don't really know the extent of the situation. It's a little bit crisis management. Things like that. Other things that if someone's not working out, hey, you like this person, but you realize that they're not working out, you have to let them go. That's a hard decision to let someone go, but you got to do it, right? All those kind of things, why you can't help your cousin or why you do this, you have to take a very, very hard assessment of what's going on. And the entrepreneurs that are successful do that really, really well. It's hard, but at the end of the day, it's not company camp, and you're really trying to get business off the ground. And in a very early stage, there's not much room for error. And so I like using the word project because a lot of times it's hard to see the situation, just like it's hard to see the two women in this picture. But if you're good, you get really, really good at taking out all the distractions and be able to really focus in terms of what you're supposed to be doing. All right? All right. So we'll start moving a little quickly. Pepto-Bismol, right? This is a little bit counterintuitive, so you really want to listen to this one. When you're starting up, there are plenty of opportunities. There are plenty of things you could do. And when you're starting up, you don't have an idea. You're trying to figure out what to do. So at some level, you just kind of more the merrier. But very, very quickly, the problem is focus. It sounds ironic, but the more you focus, the more you succeed. And so there's a very common saying that happens in startups and start running businesses. Indigestion is worse than starvation, which means you're not going to starve because you don't have enough to do. You're going to die of indigestion because you absorb too much to do and you can't be good at everything. So focus, 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 focus. For example, and how it relates to here. When I talked about commerce focus a number of years ago, we actually focused more and more just on not trying to be marketing for everybody. How do we just focus on retailers or people driving transactions so the shopping cart is our primary focus? It seems ironic that you say you focus in, you're like, well, isn't that make a smaller business? And actually doesn't. It works exactly the opposite. The more you focus, the more unique in terms of whatever you're doing, the easier it is to get customers, so you actually expand your business. It's really, really hard to do. And a lot of people struggle with it because certainly when you're early on, you're hungry for lots of things. But very early, after that, you're going to get to a stage where it's about saying no to things versus yes. And if you stick to that strategy, and you remember that indigestion is worse than starvation, then you actually find you have a bit more success. And that's certainly been true with Bronto too. So this is the key one. There's something called the Entrepreneurial Paradox, right? And Entrepreneurial Paradox says the people that are good at starting businesses aren't good at managing them. And for the most part, and venture capitalists probably get a fair reputation of idea of funding an early stage company and then kicking out the founders. And as harsh as that is, and as an entrepreneur, obviously I don't like that idea, but in many cases it's very true. It makes sense. And the reason is the skills you need to kind of be really scrappy, start a business, and do all those kind of things I mentioned. You get to a certain size, and very quickly that's exactly what you don't want to do. And so the entrepreneurial paradox is the people that are very good at this often aren't very good at this. and fail, even though they did such a great job there. Because the skills that you need are exactly opposite. So early stage, when I was starting Bronto, it's about what I could do, what I could code, how quickly I could do it, how many different things I could do, because I could do it more effectively and faster and better than other people. But for those of you who've worked on small teams, if you've ever had a manager that was all about I, what they can do, that'd be the worst job ever, right? And it wouldn't get very far. And it really never extends beyond that one person. And so, and then you move into something bigger, and you have this egomaniacal leader, and it just doesn't work because they can't scale beyond themselves. So the tricky thing, the reason I put this up here is, this is absolutely true, and Bronto has many stages in front of it, is when you're at the 0 stage, what you need to do to start a business is very different than when you're here. And you have to figure out what game you're playing at the time, and if you can, you might be completely content. I'm an engineer, and I want to stay an engineer. That's all I want to do. In which case, you have to be very realistic and bring other people in to fill the different roles. It's the CEO position, other things. It's not just to be about, I'm the founder. It's not an ego thing. It's a different role and responsibility, and it's very, very different when you're here compared to even when you're here. Right now, what I have to do is I have to communicate, give presentations. Tomorrow we have a company lunch. We're going to talk about our direction for 2012. I don't touch code, right? They don't want me touching code. They shouldn't want me touching code. That's a bad, bad thing. I'm not writing marketing copy. I'm not doing a lot of things, but I'm setting direction for the company. That is, if I sat around all day and did that here, that would be a really bad idea. And this is where most MBAs fail, actually, because they're kind of like that. So that's where it comes a little bit to the Karate Kid experiences, that you're going to pick up experiences in your life that you kind of want to tuck away a little bit, because those early teaching experiences, not so valuable here. What was valuable here is when I was a freshman sophomore taking comp sci classes, I could stay up all night doing my problem sets. That's what was valuable here, right? Despite all my additional degrees and all this kind of stuff. That's not valuable here, right? That's not valuable here at all. What's really valuable is the ability to kind of teach, communicate, listen, understand what people are saying, put together in a very clear, concise strategy. And so it changes. And it doesn't mean you have to be good at everything. For me, I like being able to adjust and evolve all the different stages, but that's me. It's very important to realize where you are and what you want to do, because ultimately you're going to be successful, not because you can do everything, it's because you're just aware of what role you play. And it's hard because you get committed to your baby, and it's hard to kind of step back and do different things, but that tends to be very true. Okay, almost there. All right. Oh, sorry. New computers here. All right. Second to last thing is, when I joined Red Hat, one of the main reasons I joined Red Hat, I thought it'd be an interesting experience, but I knew I was an entrepreneur at heart. But I thought it'd be really, really valuable to just spend a year or even 6 months or whatever. I think it was ultimately there about a little over a year. See a successful company and see how they run. Did I have long-term visions of moving up the ladder? No. But I wanted to see what a similar company. This company, when I joined, was about 100 people. Bronto is bigger than that now. And it has been immensely valuable in 2 big ways. One, I had some broad idea of how you structure a software internet company. And not just because I read about it, it's just because you kind of see what's going on. That was really valuable. The second thing that was very valuable is contacts. Many of our management team people are people that I knew were really, really good, and they were leaders in doing this at Red Hat. And so having a connection, not as much early on, here it was irrelevant. Here, it became really, really relevant. Early co-founder came from Red Hat. Much of our VPs that came from Red Hat. All-star company based here in Centennial campus. At the time, they were actually based in Durham. And that has been essential for building the company. So at Bronto, we're just, on the grand scheme of things, an itty-bitty little company. But we've actually already had 2 companies spin out of ours where both founders came out of Red Hat. They're doing related but different things. And at first, you think, oh, God, why is everyone leaving this company? It's really kind of hurts. But then you get into it, and you're like, this is how we support the community. We're very open. We like those things. We encourage people. We want great, smart, ambitious people, and great, ambitious, smart people. Many of them go start their own companies. And so that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. And when you look at the entrepreneurship communities of Silicon Valley and New York and Colorado and other places, Austin, that's what they got going on. So if Bronto can do its own little part and can help foster that, That's a good thing. So, and that's been pretty valuable as well. It was a lot more valuable to go here than, say, some other company where I wouldn't have got that type of experience. All right. So lesson number 10, which is really important. A few months ago we did this thing where you could have this group come in. I think it's called Bottles and Brushes, where basically you can group paint different things, and then also I think there's a lot of drinking of alcohol as well. I think you drink the alcohol a little bit more afterwards, hopefully. But key thing is you got to think about what you're doing. Like, why? What are you trying to do? I know at first you're thinking about the feature, you're thinking about the product, you're thinking about the service, but like ultimately, are you trying to build a company? Are you trying to build a transaction to flip it because there's an opportunity in the next year you think to sell this company? Are you working on a feature because you're using Gmail and you thought there's this little feature that would be kind of nice to add on and maybe there's a market opportunity there? What are you trying to do? Because ultimately at Bronto, despite the product and all this, I really wanted to build a company. I wanted to build an organization with a different view in terms of how we should operate. And I knew we could do lots of wonderful things that I was very interested and proud of. So at the end of the day, once you get into it, I know it's hard, you're going to get to a point where you want to build something you're really proud of. And that's hopefully where you end up with Bronto. All right, I am almost there. I think I got this one. So I'm just going to summary. I won't go through these. I think I got those mostly right. So there we go. That's teaching experience right there, signposting. And so, and that's it, right? And so I hope to, obviously this is kind of Halloween. I want to thank you guys. If you guys have any questions, I love answering questions. Remember, this comes into the low-high expectation part, the ground rules that we talked about early on. So, any questions? Okay. I'll start with you because you're closer. Sorry, front row. You get some benefits. Thanks for sitting up here.
You said you don't have like investors.
That's right.
Like that. So where is your financial liability line?
So, you mean in terms of
like if
how do we get started?
Fails, are you going bankrupt? That kind of thing.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So if your business fails, so one of the things about incorporation is it creates a different entity almost like a person. So if the business goes bankrupt, for the most part, it goes bankrupt. For a long time, I had to personally secure some things. So for example, for the most part, we started very cheap. We wouldn't spend anything we didn't have. So it was like, it failed and we just kind of lost what we had. It wasn't as much I would lose anything. But then when we started signing longer leases and things like that, I had to personally secure that. But by that time, we were kind of further along that we had enough cash in the bank that I wasn't too concerned about that. But the key thing is, and this is very conservative, we basically didn't spend what we had. We didn't take any debt, right? We basically used time, developed something, take in some money, spend it, invest in people or something else, marketing, to get 2 customers, and take 2 customers, turn them to 3 and 4 and 5. So basically, that wasn't a big concern for me. The concern was not having income. It wasn't as much kind of having my house or anything else leverage in my particular case. That's my story. Yes. Over there. Yes, sure. Yeah, no, that's a, yeah. So, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I forgot. I was told that. So, where did the dinosaur come from? So, you've all been second graders, right? You were all 7. Hopefully, at some point in your life, you didn't skip back. And when I was in 7 and second grader, I was really obsessed with dinosaurs. I was really convinced I was going to be a paleontologist. I didn't become a paleontologist, honestly, but I kind of kept that passion with dinosaurs. I really kind of forgot what I got into Dungeons and Dragons and other things and sports and all that. But when it came to name the company, you can name anything you want, right? So I harked back to my childhood passions of not becoming a paleontologist. I also wanted something that was tangible. So this is more the marketing person in me. You guys know what this is? Okay, actually you're all wrong. Brontosauruses were discredited when they went for discover them. It's actually the worst possible name in the world. there was a race for discovery and they had the wrong head on it. So actually the Brontosaurus that we all know as childhood favorites got discredited and is now mythical. So not only is the company named after an extinct animal that has the brain size of a pea that tended to be chomped by other dinosaurs, it didn't actually exist. I think it's actually a Brachiosaurus or something like that, Potosaurus. But the short answer is I was fascinated with dinosaurs, didn't become a paleontologist. So I wanted to hark back about the name. Also, I wanted to build a company that had a brand that meant something. I didn't want to name it something technology. I wanted, so when people saw this shape, that started building the fact that we have, we're great customer service, that we're very approachable, passionate people. Just like when you look at the Apple logo. When you look at the Apple logo, you don't think, oh, I'm kind of hungry. You kind of think, that's a design-centric company. It's cool, it's hip. When you look at Nike, you think whatever. When you look at whatever brands, it takes time. But you start connoting ideas with objects. And so we use this logo in a whole bunch of different ways, and it reinforces it. I'm happy to announce, though, thanks to a paleontologist last year, the Brontosaurus didn't exist, so the whole Bronto thing was mythical. But he discovered another dinosaur, and he thought this was a problem in the world, so he named it Brontothenus. So Brontosaurus, right, Bronto means thunder, and saurus means lizard, right? That's the kind of the Greek. But Brontothenus, Bronto means thunder, and Themis means thighs. So he named it after Suzanne, I swear to God, Suzanne Summers, you remember those commercials, Thunder Thighs? So there's a Brontothenus that kind of looks like this. So paleontologists, they have a funny sense of humor. They're very funny people. All right, other questions? Let's start in the back and then we'll come forward. Yeah? I'm sorry, what part of the story? Well, I think a few things. One of them is the whole get technical or go home, or have a technical co-founder. Software is technical, right? You need to know, early on, I was kind of lamenting that, I had this MBA, why am I spending my days trying to fix out, navigate around the Linux command line, this seems irrelevant. But the reality, I had an older brother who's like, you gotta know something, right? So I knew software. I knew how to design software. I knew how, more so than me, I'm more of a product person. I knew how to design products. So, but if I was doing something hardware-wise, I don't really know. I mean, I know enough. I don't really know hardware or medical devices or maybe a service. I don't really know that. That's not really my passion. So, in that point of view, it's relevant. The second thing is, it's not like you're going to sit in your house with no money and not take a salary, and suddenly you're going to form something that you're going to sell to a pharma company. It's just not going to happen, right? So, software. A lot of these strategies, which makes it a recipe, not the recipe, is because on the internet and developing software, I can magnify my efforts a lot more, right? I can do it with relatively low capital, just have a computer, a lot of free time, and some smarts. I couldn't do that if I was with a pharma company. So that's why it comes back to this is a recipe, not the recipe, and it kind of depends on the situation. But it worked for me. Other questions? Oh yeah, I said come forward, yeah.
So there was a time when you were starting out, probably picked up momentum and you were worried that you were going to lose it. What tactically did you do at that point? Can you tell a story about how all of a sudden you got to some point that was a critical juncture and you started to get the 2x2 leverage?
Yeah, in some ways that didn't happen. I mean, I'm kind of still waiting for that to happen. It's a little bit of, it's always about getting one customer, then another customer, another customer. And I've always kind of felt there's been a little bit of a knife to the throat of like, we have to get to the next level, we have to get to the next level. It's never been like just easy in a sense, but it's gotten different. So it's really less about that. It's more about in order to get the growth we need 3 years from now, what am I doing now to ensure that happens? So for example, I don't spend my time much with engineering or sales. I'm spending my time, last week I was in London, and so I'm looking at how do I set up an office in Europe, right? I know year 1 and year 2, it's not going to be significant. But if I have to think big picture and how I can get to 1,500 and beyond, I need a huge hub that's going to cover EMEA. I need Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and I have to set that up in London. That means I need to start today. So it's more of that. It's more like, what am I doing now? And that's more unique to my role. So 3 years in the span of time, at early stage, it's very, very short, but later on. So I know that we're kind of set up for success. That's kind of more how I look at it.
Yeah, maybe one last question.
All right, right there. Yeah, line helps quite a bit, right? So, and I'll tell you really quickly why. So the gist is, there's some pretty clear strategies.
What was the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Again, I'm not doing a good job with that repeating thing. When you're first starting off, how do you get your first customer? Right? So what you want to do is, I'll tell you what I did and then what works really well. Is you basically want to get free customers. You want to get people that are going to use it, maybe 10, and you don't want to be too hung up on the money. You want to make sure they value it, so they're real users, but you don't want to be hung up on the money. And you really kind of use them to beta test it, and you also say, in exchange for this, I need you to write some testimonials, maybe you'll help me out write some examples. And then for that 11th customer doesn't know that the first 10 were free. And so it's a pretty clear, you basically started with some set of free, and maybe it's hand-selected, right? And then after that, you leverage the 11th or 12th, or however you do. You leverage the experience from the 10 and their recommendations to get the 11th. In our case, since we started with no money, we started very local. So we basically, local businesses, we would overservice them. We would give them so much attention that was wildly unprofitable, but because we just need a customer. And it would make perfect sense. And then we get 1 and 2. And then as we grew, we didn't use that strategy because early on our strategy was the fact that we were small and local, we're going to overservice you, we're going to give you so much attention. Now, we leverage those experiences, the first 10 to get the next 20. But it's hard to get the first customer. They say the first customer is as tough as the first 10, as tough as the first 100. But it's a key step because it really validates that you're doing something right. And then it's just a matter of doing it over and over and over again. Okay.
Thank you, Jim.